Why do we do the things we do? Today, we're diving deep into this really cool podcast. It's called Mind Matters.
And the best part is it's actually based on science.
Welcome to our deep dive. We're going to be exploring the world of individual differences in psychology. It's a really fascinating area.
It is. It's really relevant, too, especially when you think about things like, well, HR.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially, think about working in HR in Luxembourg's financial sector. You're dealing with people from all different backgrounds.
Right, exactly. So much diversity.
Yeah, and this deep dive is actually based on a paper by Ivana. She wrote it for London Metropolitan University, and it's going to give us a lot to unpack today.
It really does. A lot of the work that HR professionals do boils down to understanding how people think and learn and interact, and those things, they're different for everybody.
Right. And so once you kind of have a grasp on those differences, then you can really start to build strong teams, develop talent in the right way, and ultimately create a more inclusive environment.
Exactly. And that's especially important in a multicultural hub like Luxembourg, right?
Right, for sure. So let's jump into it. I guess, we always hear about intelligence, right?
Yeah.
But is it really just one thing?
Well, no, it's not. The paper actually talks about two main types of intelligence that are really relevant in a work setting.
Okay.
So first, you have fluid intelligence.
Fluid intelligence?
Yeah, it's basically your ability to think on your feet, solve problems you've never seen before, adapt to new situations.
Okay, so that makes sense. That's super important, right, for a lot of those fast-paced, high-pressure financial roles.
Exactly. Think about it, a trader reacting to a sudden, market shift, or an analyst who has to spot a trend buried in a ton of data.
Yeah. That's fluid intelligence in action.
Yeah.
It's being able to think quickly, adapt.
Exactly. But then you have crystallized intelligence, which is a little bit different. That's more about applying the knowledge and experience that you've built up over time.
Got it. Okay. So that's like a financial advisor. They've been in the market for years. They've seen it all. They're drawing on all that experience to, give advice to clients.
Exactly. Or a tax expert, someone who really knows those complex regulations inside and out. They're using crystallized intelligence.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the interesting thing is that crystallized intelligence can actually keep growing throughout your career.
Okay, so it's not like it peaks at a certain age and then that's it.
Not at all. That's actually a really interesting point for someone working in HR. The paper really emphasizes how understanding these two types of intelligence can be incredibly valuable, for things like designing training programs.
Yeah. So, okay, how would you use that information then? If let's say you're developing a training program and you're thinking about fluid versus crystallized intelligence.
Okay, well, imagine you have a team of young analysts. They're in Luxembourg, and they're learning to use, a new financial software. Now, their fluid intelligence might mean that they pick up the logic of the program pretty quickly.
Right.
But then you have a senior manager, someone who might rely more on crystallized intelligence. For them, it might be more beneficial to have training that connects that software back to processes they already know.
Oh, okay. So you're basically meeting people where they are, cognitively speaking.
Exactly. You're providing training that aligns with their strengths, with how they learn best.
Right, because not everyone learns the same way.
Exactly. What works for one person might not work for another. It's all about, customization.
Yeah. And I guess, it kind of highlights how having different ages in a company can actually be a really good thing.
It is. You get that blend of fresh perspectives from the younger employees and then that deep experience from, people who have been in the field for longer. And they each bring different cognitive strengths to the table.
Right. They complement each other.
Exactly. Now, along with intelligence, the paper also digs into personality.
Personality. Yeah, everyone's got one. And they can be pretty different.
That's right. And personality, it's about those consistent patterns and how we behave, how we think and feel and react in different situations.
Yeah.
And it really shapes how we approach our work, how we interact with colleagues, how we handle stress. Understanding these patterns, it can be just as important as understanding those cognitive abilities.
Absolutely. I bet you a lot of people listening have heard of the Myers-Briggs. Right? The MBTI. It's that personality test.
Oh, yeah. It's very popular, especially in corporate settings.
Yeah. People love finding out if they're an introvert or an extrovert, a thinker or a feeler.
Right. And while the MBTI can be, a fun way to kind of start conversations about personality. From a scientific standpoint, well, it's not the most reliable tool.
Oh, really? So it's not as scientifically sound as some people might think?
Yeah, it's more for like entertainment purposes.
Right.
When it comes to like making serious decisions, especially in HR, you need something a little bit more robust.
Okay, so what's the alternative?
Well, the paper points to the Big Five model of personality. Sometimes it's called the OCEAN model.
Ocean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an acronym. It stands for openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism.
Okay, that's a mouthful. So what do those traits actually tell us about a person?
Well, let's take conscientiousness as an example.
Okay.
Someone who scores high in conscientiousness, they're probably very organized, dependable, detail-oriented, all those qualities. They're really valuable in roles that require a lot of accuracy, a lot of responsibility, like accounting or compliance.
Okay, so if I'm putting together a team and they're going to be working on a big auditing project, I might want to look for people who score high in conscientiousness.
Exactly.
Okay, got it. But what about someone who scores low in that area? Does that mean that they're like not a good employee?
Not at all. I mean, every trait, it exists on a spectrum. So someone who might be lower in conscientiousness, they might be more spontaneous, more adaptable. And those qualities, they could be really valuable in like a fast-paced creative environment, like marketing.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So it's really about understanding like the strengths and also the I guess the potential challenges that go with each trait.
Yeah, exactly. And then finding the right fit for the role, for the team, it's all about fit.
This is making me think about, Luxembourg's financial sector specifically. I mean, you have so many different people from all over the world, all these different cultures working together.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see how this all ties into that specific context.
It is a really interesting case study, yeah. I mean, think about it. You could have a team with German engineers, and they're known for, their precision, their very meticulous approach to things. And then in the same company, you have a French marketing team, and they might thrive on that, creative flair, thinking outside the box.
Yeah, totally different styles.
Exactly. And recognizing those cultural influences on personality and how people approach work, that's so crucial for, creating a work environment where everyone can, be productive and work together harmoniously.
Yeah. It's like, how do we as HR professionals actually put this knowledge into practice? I mean, I get it, the concepts are interesting, but what do we actually do with it?
Well, think about something like communication.
Okay.
Let's say you have someone who scores really high in extroversion.
Mm-hmm.
They probably love brainstorming sessions.
Yeah.
Being in a group, feeding off that energy.
Yeah, they get energized by that.
Right. But then you have someone who's more introverted. They might prefer to, think things through on their own, kind of reflect individually before they share their ideas.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
So the paper talks about how recognizing those differences can help you, structure meetings differently, or think about different communication channels that work for different people.
Yeah, so it's like you're creating a communication ecosystem that actually works for everybody instead of just like forcing everyone into the same, mold.
Exactly. It's about recognizing those differences and then, adapting to them.
Yeah, yeah. I like that. Okay. What about training? How does all of this play into how we train people?
Well, let's say you're rolling out a new compliance training program. Okay.
Right.
Someone high in openness, they might be super excited to like learn through simulations or case studies, things that are interactive.
Right.
But someone who's lower in openness, they might prefer something much more structured, a step-by-step approach, very clear guidelines.
Okay, yeah, totally different learning styles.
And the paper really emphasizes this. Tailoring your training methods to those individual differences, it can really make a difference in how much people learn and, how engaged they are with the material.
So we're really moving away from that one-size-fits-all approach to like almost everything in HR, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. It's recognizing that people are different and we need to like embrace that.
Absolutely.
Okay, what about team building? How does all of this play into how we build teams?
Well, when you're putting together a team, especially in a, high-stakes environment like finance, understanding personality dynamics can be, it can be crucial.
In what way?
Like, think about this. Imagine a team where everybody scores really high in agreeableness.
Right.
They might have trouble making tough decisions
Uh,
or challenging each other's ideas, you know?
Oh, because everyone just wants to get along.
Right. They don't want to rock the boat. But a little bit of, healthy friction, maybe from someone who's a bit lower in agreeableness, that can actually lead to some really innovative solutions.
Oh, interesting. So sometimes a little bit of disagreement can actually be a good thing.
It can be, yeah. It's about finding that balance. You want a team that can collaborate effectively, but also, push each other a little bit.
Yeah, you need people who can challenge the status quo.
Right. And this is where, understanding the big five can be so helpful. It gives you that deeper level of insight into how people are going to interact, what their strengths are, and maybe where some potential challenges might arise.
It's like having a secret weapon for building really strong teams.
In a way, yeah. And remember, these personality traits, they're relatively stable over time. So these insights, they're not just for like the short term. They can be valuable for long-term team development as well.
Okay, so this has been really helpful for understand how to put together teams and how to communicate and train people effectively. But, we've been talking a lot about using assessments to understand these differences, right? How do we know that the assessments themselves are actually reliable? That they're giving us good information?
That's a really important point, and the paper addresses that directly. Buddha Sinchi really emphasizes the importance of objectivity, reliability, and validity when you're choosing and using assessment.
Okay, break those down for me. What do those terms actually mean?
Okay, so objectivity, that means that the assessment isn't biased by the person who's giving it or interpreting the results. It's like a standardized test. Everybody gets the same questions. The scoring is clear-cut. It eliminates personal bias.
Okay, so it's not about someone's gut feeling. It's about having a standardized, objective measure. Got it.
Right.
What about reliability?
Reliability is all about consistency.
Okay.
If you take the same assessment multiple times, you should get pretty similar results each time, assuming nothing major has changed, of course.
Right. It's like stepping on a scale. You expect it to show you roughly the same weight every time, unless you've, suddenly gained or lost a lot.
Exactly. Consistency is key.
Okay. So objectivity is about eliminating bias. Reliability is about consistency. What about validity?
Validity, that's about whether the assessment is actually measuring what it's supposed to measure.
Okay. So if I'm using an assessment to measure, let's say, conscientiousness, I want to make sure that the questions are really getting at that trait, right? Not something else.
Exactly. And this is one of the strengths of the Big Five model. It's been rigorously tested and validated over, decades of research. So it's a much stronger choice than something like, the MBTI, which doesn't have that same level of scientific backing.
This has been really eye-opening. It's amazing to see how these, psychological concepts can actually be applied to HR, especially in a place as complex as Luxembourg's financial sector.
Yeah.
I'm really starting to see how understanding these individual differences could be a game changer.
It really can be. I mean, it's about recognizing that people are different and that those differences are valuable.
Yeah. But where do we go from here? I mean, it's a lot to take in. Where do we even begin?
Yeah, it is a lot. It's almost like we've been given this, this decoder ring for understanding people.
Yeah.
And that's exciting, but I can see how it could be a bit overwhelming. How do we actually put all of this into practice? Well, I think the first step is just awareness, just being conscious of these concepts. Fluid and crystallized intelligence, the big five personality traits, and just noticing how they play out in your everyday interactions at work.
So just start paying attention.
Yeah, just observe. How do people approach their work? How do they communicate with each other? How do they react to challenges?
Yeah. It's like becoming a people watcher, but with a purpose.
Exactly. And I think, as you start to become more aware of those individual differences, you naturally start to adapt your own style, how you communicate, how you lead.
You become more flexible.
Right. It's less about, forcing everyone to fit into the same box and more about creating an environment where, different strengths can thrive.
Yeah.
And that's so important, especially in a place like Luxembourg's financial sector. It's all about innovation, collaboration. You need all those different perspectives.
Okay, so let's recap some of the key takeaways for our listeners, especially those who are, working in HR in Luxembourg. What are the big things to remember?
Well, first of all, remember that this isn't just theory, right? Understanding individual differences, it has real practical implications for how you do your job, how you recruit, how you train, how you manage, how you motivate people.
Right. It's about recognizing that everyone's different and that, those differences matter.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's one big takeaway. What else?
The second takeaway is to think beyond just that, single IQ score when you're assessing intelligence. Really think about both fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence.
And remember, those two types of intelligence, they might look different in different age groups, which is especially relevant in Luxembourg with its diverse workforce.
Right, exactly. You might have those recent graduates with high fluid intelligence picking up new technologies really quickly. And then you have those seasoned professionals who have a wealth of knowledge and experience, that crystallized intelligence. It's about recognizing and valuing both.
Okay, so embrace the differences. What's the third big takeaway?
Well, when it comes to personality, remember the Big Five model. It's a really valuable tool, and it's been, very well researched. It gives you that framework for understanding how people behave, how they interact.
And don't forget about those three key concepts we talked about: objectivity, reliability, and validity.
Yes, those are crucial. You want to make sure you're using assessments that are, scientifically sound and that are appropriate for the cultural context that you're working in.
Okay, so much great information to digest. Before we go, any final thoughts for our listeners? Anything to, kind of leave them pondering?
Yeah. We talked about how fluid intelligence peaks earlier in life and crystallized intelligence keeps growing. So think about this. How could you use that knowledge to approach talent development differently for, your younger employees versus your more experienced employees?
That's a good question. Maybe you create mentorship programs where you pair those younger employees with the more seasoned ones so they can learn from each other's, different strengths and perspectives.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Or maybe you design training programs that really cater to those different learning styles and career stages, recognizing that, a one-size-fits-all approach probably isn't going to be very effective.
Okay, so many possibilities. Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive. I feel like I have a whole new way of looking at, the people I work with, the people I interact with.
Yeah, and remember, this is just the beginning. There's always more to learn. But hopefully, this deep dive has given you a good foundation.
It definitely has. Well, thank you so much for taking us through all of this. And to our listeners, we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive. I don't know about you, but I'm definitely feeling inspired to start applying some of this stuff to my own life.
Me too. It's definitely a lot to unpack.
For sure.
Yeah.
But hey, that's what deep dives are for, right?
Absolutely.
So until next time, happy exploring.
Yeah. Keep those brains working.